Hello, welcome again to another episode of the Crotchety Old Men Podcast. I'm Gary Smith, one of the co-hosts of the Crotchety Old Men, and joining me in the studio today is my main man, George Crumley. Top of the day to you, Trove.
Smitty, top of the day. How you doing today?
Man, I'm doing exceedingly well. Exceedingly well.
That means you got some good stuff for us today and for our audience.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I'm so excited about our guest that we're having on today. I'm trying to contain my composure here, but this guy here, man, I'm telling you, he's going to drop a lot of pearls, a lot of wisdom, a lot of information. I just hope everybody's got their notepad ready and a fresh pencil and have a pen too, because what he's going to share with you, you probably want to write it in stone. So, George, go ahead. What do you got?
I was just going to say, Smith, that's the whole focus here on the Crotchety Old Men is, to make sure that we can bring our audience new and exciting guests and bring information here again this year. We want to make sure that we're touching on subjects that, can enlighten our audience and give them some view into some of the other things that financially can help them. Here again, interviewing successful businessmen of all colors that, just kind of help us keep our audience informed as to what's going on. So, without further ado, Smitty, let's go ahead and get into it.
All right, then. Well, hell, it gives me great pleasure to introduce John Redmond. Now, John Redmond is out of the Dallas, Texas market. He's a property tax manager with the Altus Group, where he partners on major commercial real estate deals, working with retailers, owners, real estate investment trusts. And what I like about his background is that he strategically is able to reduce tax liabilities as it relates to commercial real estate. I know not long ago in a previous episode, we talked about tax assessment and things like that as it related to residential real estate. But I thought it would be a good idea to have John come on and share with us some of the things that are probably go missing, especially in our business community as it relates to commercial real estate. Now, John has a really rich background. Not only is he a tax manager, if you will, but he's also a CCIM. And for those of you in commercial real estate or real estate period, you understand that that's a certified commercial investment member. And so that means that he's going to spend a lot of money, a lot of time getting the education, getting the knowledge, so that he's able to deliver the results. John holds an MBA in finance. Then he has a bachelor's degree in science in IT and business. He's a family man. He's dedicated to innovation and in the real estate business and stuff. And so I could go on and on and on and talk about the things that John has done in his career. He and I befriended about 12 or 13 years ago. And I tell you, every time I talk to John on the phone, I got a pencil and pad by my side as well. So without any further ado, man, let's welcome John Redmond. Take it away, John. How you doing?
Thank you, Gary. Thank you. That was a great introduction. Had to pinch myself. I was like, is he talking about me? But yeah, thank you. First off, honored to be here. Thank you guys for having me. Full circle moment for me, Gary. As you said, we connected 13 years ago when I was, I'm still young, but, fresh in the game and just trying to figure out how I'm going to make it in the world of commercial real estate. You've always poured into me and I've enjoyed our conversations about life, not just real estate, about life. As you do with your podcast listeners, you always leave us with something to think about, fresh perspective. So definitely honored to be here.
Amen. Amen. Well, John, let's just get right into it. Tell us about your day. I mean, what do you actually do?
So I'm a property tax consultant. So what property tax consultants do, we work with owners and investors to reduce their tax liability. So I work strictly in the commercial realm. I did listen to you guys' podcast about residential. I don't have the answer for that. But no, I work strictly on commercial property. So as you said, I'm based here in Texas. And as you know, here in Texas, we don't have sales tax. Texas is real pro business, but we do have really high property taxes. So Texas is pretty much the holy grail for property taxes in the U.S. There's more money to be made here, in my field as being a consultant. So I work with the owners and investors, reduce their tax liability. As you know, you get that annual tax bill every year. and it becomes a bit much for owners to, appeal the properties themselves. They don't have the time, more than likely, and they may not have some of the expertise to reduce their value. So they will hire someone like me to come in, that's been around the block a few times and has the relationships to be an advocate for them so they don't pay more than their fair share in taxes.
So let's talk a little bit about that process, John. So how does that work? I know from a residential perspective, like you said, you get that assessment every year, and we use comparables to assess if that meets what our property or what we think the property value is. Is that the same for commercial?
Yeah, it's the same. So here in Texas, you get the lien date is as of January 1. So typically, the assessor, they value their properties up until that date. Up until that point, they use mass appraisal concepts to value, their given jurisdictions, and they send out appraisal notices, which are new value for that year around April or May here in Texas. So from that day, you have 30 days to appeal the property. You have to file the appeal. I'm sorry, and then from that moment, you go to the board, which is the owner or the advocate for the owner, which would be me in this situation, the appraisal district or assessor, and then a third party 3-member panel that will decide what the value should be. And so we use 3 approaches to value here. As we all know, commercial properties are income producing assets. So we would use the income approach. Some cases it may be the cost approach, whether you're dealing with hospitals or new construction. And then also here in Texas, we have the equal and uniform provision, which is similar to the sales comparison approach, but the equal and uniform provision means that my comparables, I'm not taxed on the price per square foot more than them. So you would take the median in that instance. So we will use those 3 approaches of value, and Texas law states it's the lowest of those 3.
Wow, that's interesting. Interesting. George, go ahead. What's your
Yeah, it
question?
sounds a lot like the residential process. Like I said, was fortunate to go through that process, and like you say, it's the same thing where you have the yourself, the tax board, then you'll have 3 members, and I'm assuming those are 3 members from the community that are also
3 members from the community.
so your peers.
They
So
have
it sounds
some
like
type of real estate background,
Mhm.
typically.
Right, they provide some types of classes so that they're astute as far as what's going on. So let me ask you this: what do you see as some of your big challenges? Because I would think from if I'm trying to reduce or the property tax on a very large building, that it's a lot different than a house. So what are some of your challenges in doing that and being successful?
Some of the challenges are just really, I would say, getting the assessor to realize that their value is too high. That's the biggest challenge. Unlike residential, with the income producing part, it's a lot more gray area, you know, and to answer your question some more, we may argue cap rates, we may argue expense ratios, and whatever the market is, the appraisal district can be out of touch with it because, their job is to reflect the market and not predict the market. So they're using sales from the year prior.
Yeah, I would think that, buildings don't change ownership that often. So I would think that it would be somewhat difficult to find a lot of comps. So yeah, you kind of going,
Well, here in Texas, we're blessed. So it's a lot of comps. It's a lot of
really?
it's a lot of transactions going on, stuff. A lot of properties trading hands. Even now, in our current economic climate, properties are still trading hands. Not as much as they were a couple of years ago, but no, they still are. So, it's not hard finding comps for sure.
Okay.
It's just that, you know, what is the true cap rate?
Okay, so right now, we're talking at a pretty high level. So for our audience, let's kind of bring it down a little bit. Can you talk about maybe one of the successful deals that you were involved with, and then explain why it was successful. Because sometimes when you bring the property tax down, you're not bringing it down by a lot, but you are successful in showing the assessor that he had the wrong rate. So it doesn't have to be a huge deal, but kind of walk through a deal that you felt that was successful and you accomplished what you wanted to accomplish for the owner of the building.
Oh, sure. Okay. So early in my career, and I'll take a step back. So I have a really good understanding of how the appraisal district assessor work, because that's actually where I started my career. I was there when I originally met Gary and reached out to him. So I know the nuts and bolts, how they operate. So early on in my career, I was representing a owner of a vacant urgent care. The year prior, it was 100% occupied, which means tenant was there, single tenant asset. And this year, they actually raised the value over the prior year, but this year the tenant had vacated. And, you know, originally they weren't trying to make any moves on the value. They were trying to argue that, they still thought the value was intact, when you and I both know that a commercial property is an income producing property. If you don't have a tenant, it's producing zero income. At this point, you're just paying expenses. So I was able to go to the board here and argue my case, pretty cut and dry case, say, hey, the value was X last year, and you're trying to make it the exact same this year, but it has no tenant. So I was able to get $1 million cut off the property value, and that really helped out the owner.
My goodness, $1 million. Hopefully, you're all listening out there. $1 million tax cut, tax break, or tax reduction. I don't care what you call it, but it's $1 million. And congratulations on that, John. And I'm sure there's a lot of pearls and things that you learned from that transaction. My question here is that I know Texas is fluid, very fluid in transaction volume, as you said. I mean, it's one of the hotbeds of the United States, particularly as it relates to multifamily. You see so much multifamily transaction, and there's a lot of retail to that end. But here's what I'm going to try to shift the focus here. There's a lot of owners, your small owners that own 20 units or less. Okay, those properties, primarily in multifamily, do those people miss these opportunities? I mean, it seems like sometimes that the tax breaks and the CPAs, and I know the lenders, they're really dealing with those investors that's up here to 20,000, let's say to 30,000 height, if you will, above some of the smaller investors. And what I'm trying to get to, John, is this. With those investors or property owners that have 20 units or less, are they missing something here? Should they be really in the market to appeal those taxes and things like that? Because to my knowledge, when you appeal taxes, you reduce your tax basis. Seems like the reverse of that should be that it adds to your bottom line. And so can you address that as far as the smaller business owners compared to some of the major deals or larger deals that you've done?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as you said, a smaller investor, they may not typically be as sophisticated, as some of my larger clients, whether it's a REIT or, pro- syndicators that have portfolios, properties. Those small investors, they may not, more than likely, they're out of town investors. And so they're not even sure about the actual tax appeal process. They purchased the asset, they're collecting on it, and their numbers are working and stuff. So yeah, um, at my former firm, I target a lot of small investors, because I'll be running my equal and uniform analysis, as I stated before, just to make sure that a competing property wasn't paying too much. And what I would notice is the property would be way too high on the price per square foot. Now here in Texas, you can actually, go to the assessor's website and see if it has a property tax consultant or not. So from a marketing standpoint, I was able to, reach out to them and say, hey, compared to comparable properties, you're way too high. And most of them didn't even know that you can even hire a property tax consultant, because they may be in a state, where they have a really low, tax rate, and it's really no point of appealing. And so, yeah, to answer your question, yeah, it's definitely a lot of opportunities missed by the small investors, particularly the ones that are out of state.
Interesting. So, are there any incentives? I know, obviously, there's the incentive of not of not or of seeing your property tax go down, but are there any other advantages to the actual building owner? Say, like on the residential side, it freezes it for 3 years. Are there any advantages to that state?
The main advantage is, like Gary said, you're saving money, and as we know, the taxes are the largest line item on an operating statement. So once I save you money, and that is going to in return increase your NOI and increase your value. We don't have value freezes here in Texas like other states, and since we have so many transactions here, they're raising value. Couple years ago, they were raising values every single year. So you really have to appeal the property every single year.
Sure, this is very good information, John. I am so glad that you're here today because we typically, when we think about commercial real estate, well, real estate in general, most of us are not thinking in terms of those people who have properties out of state. And you really hit on something there. So it doesn't really matter what size your portfolio is that I know as an investor myself, I always target those out of state investors for various reasons. Okay. But this right here is one that I think bodes well for any investor to have in their arsenal, if you will, of tools. I know we have the cost segregation where you can utilize that to reduce, or at least get some tax benefits or reduction relief there. But this tax assessment part, or appealing, I should say, just adds on to it. I got a quick question here. So now, during the course of appealing taxes, does this happen to work in reverse? And what I mean by that is that for those who are looking to refinance, now that they've gone and appealed their taxes to reduce the valuation, doesn't that come back to haunt them in some form or another, or does it not?
Oh, no, it doesn't. That's another thing you guys are talking about. I mean, you have different values, right? You have the taxable value and you have the market value. Now, historically, they're not equal, but where we are in the market now with values declining, they're almost similar now. But that taxable value in no way affects anything else as far as the price that you can get for refinancing or the market value. I mean, I've seen instances where I was actually, you know, working for the appraisal district or assessor where a property was sell for $30 million, but it was on the tax rolls for $10 million. So they can't. The assessors are typically, as I said, they're behind the market if the market is going up, and then also too, like I said, they're using old data, so and they don't have stuff that may be up to date, so they may be behind, and also too, they may not appraise a particular market area as much as any other area that may be have a lot of transaction stuff. So they can be behind. So no, but to answer your question, no, it doesn't affect it at all.
Good answer. I think I answered it the same way. I'm surprised I hit you with that question. But anyway, moving along. So,
I
John, what's
want
the
I wanted to
industry?
jump in when I was listening to that.
And help me out, right?
That's why I asked the question twice.
They were trying to gang up on me that day. So let's change gears a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the industry. What's opportunity because it's a very interesting field, and I'm just wondering from a employment employer opportunity. What's the opportunity like to get into this field, and how do you get into a field like this?
Well, that's a great question. I would say there's a great opportunity to get into the field because you know, as you guys know, this isn't a sexy field like being a commercial real estate broker or developer. So, a lot of students or aspiring commercial real estate professionals, they may not know about it. I didn't even know about it when I first moved to Dallas. It was kind of one of those things that I fell into, and it ended up being a blessing. And so with that being said, it's a lot of industry players that are retiring, and there's a gap and need for young talent to come into the field, and I believe that I got in at the perfect time. To also answer your question, to get in, I mean, you really just need a business, finance degree, and just understand real estate, because it's one of those things where we fall under the consulting slash valuation, a little bit of appraisal category. And so if you understand how to value properties, and have a desire to be in commercial real estate and do something that's ancillary part of the industry, yeah, it's definitely a field that's growing, and I don't see it being eliminated anytime soon, because as we all know, taxes are definitely here to stay, and there's going to be someone needed at all times to fight the values.
Okay. All right. So now you've been in real estate for a long time. You've gone through various tranches in the commercial real estate realm. What do you see? What does your tea leaves tell you in terms of time? What time are we here in the market? What I mean by that is that do you see us going into a recessionary period anytime soon for there to be a correction, or do you see this being somewhat of a lull in the market and then things are going to take off and zoom again? What's your perspective on that, John?
Gary, that's a great question. I would say, and I always say here in Texas, because Texas is completely different from the rest of the United States. I would say here in Texas, I think that maybe next year we're going to come out of this recession, or whatever you want to call it, and values are going to start back climbing up, and activity is going to climb up, simply because of we had to slow down simply because of the interest rate environment, like here and anywhere else. But there's a lot of money waiting on the sideline here that I know of for sure, that's just waiting to hop back in so these deals can make sense and pencil again. So that on my local level, that's what I believe in. Kind of mirror that with the on the national level too. I believe some markets will recover faster than others, but I believe here in Texas we're in position to recover within the next year.
Now, when I think in terms of state of Texas, the four major metropolis come to mind automatically, and that's Dallas, Houston, Austin, and San Antonio. And in all those four cities, you have, as we know, a large CBD, Central Business District, where there's a lot of office properties. Now, going back to your thing here in tax assessment, although Texas is different and every market is different, are you seeing that the office market has taken a bigger hit, let's say, in those particular areas compared to maybe something like a New York, San Francisco, or Chicago?
I would say I think the office market is taking a big hit, here and everywhere else, outside the state as well. You know, and I'm talking specifically here. We have a lot of obsolete office that was built in the '80s, '90s, and sometimes early 2000 that has to be repurposed. I know for sure, just from talking to some of my friends in the industry, that a lot of them will be converted, but that doesn't work in in certain markets. I believe there's maybe between 6 and 10 properties I know for sure now that are being converted, and but that's because Dallas is giving incentives. As you know, that's really expensive to make that conversion. From office to multifamily. From all everything that's involved, from plumbing and anything else. So, but yeah, no. To answer your question, though, I think it's taking the biggest dive for sure. And I mean, just like anything else in commercial real estate, properties are going to have to, evolve. The use is going to evolve, and they become obsolete. So it's a good opportunity for people with creative visions to get in early and figure out what to do with this stuff, because as you know, these assets are well located and you can't just leave them sitting there. So somebody's going to figure it out. But I know for sure places like, Texas and those four metros here, they're giving incentives for developers to come and do something. And I believe, once those projects get along the way, that's going to be a case study for, other states as well.
Mm. In reading the tea leaves, what it really shows is the time for opportunity. Opportunity, if you're not in real estate, now's the time to think about seriously getting into it or joining someone who is already into it. And I'm speaking to our listeners out there. I'm hoping you're listening up because John has given us some information and he's telling us what time it is. And so stack your chips because there's going to be a lot of opportunities, and it does not necessarily mean distressed opportunities.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the opportunity is more so, or I'll say also in the ancillary positions that support a lot of these real estate opportunities, and I think that's what my takeaway here is. I mean, John has uncovered a field that I'm aware of appraisers, but wasn't aware that there was actually a position such as the one he has as far as a tax helping people bring their taxes down from a commercial perspective. So, I mean, that to me is an eye opener, and I think for our audience. And here again, here on the Crotchety Old Men is to talk about those types of things, to talk about opportunities, because people, out here and I don't know what to do. I'm confused. I don't know what direction to go in. But here again, a little research, here again, John said it just kind of fell, but a little opportunity and a little information, it gives you a whole new perspective because it sounds like a great job. It really does. And it sounds like a career that you can really build on and it's long lasting and it's not really saturated. So, I mean, I think having John on the day has been a real eye opener for me and hopefully for our audience also, as far as here again, opportunity. That's what we want to do here on the Crotchety Old Men podcast is bring opportunity as well as expose you, give you information and education. I think we've definitely done our job today. Hey, John, come on. What do you got? Anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to leave our audience with before we sign off?
I mean, I would just expound on what you just said about, looking at property tax consultant as an opportunity for a career. As I said, I've, as Gary said, I've held a lot of positions in the commercial real estate industry early on, trying to find my way, and just the way the cards stacked, I end up falling into this career field. And, it's just one of those things where, as I said, that it's not something that's sexy. It's not something that you hear about a lot, but I believe it's a great field because, I would say I've had my best years career wise over the last couple of years during this recession because, when the market is doing good, I'm going to argue that the value is too low. When the market is doing bad, I'm going to argue that the value is too high, stuff. So, it's definitely something that's almost recession proof. So I would definitely encourage, your listeners to, consider this as a career opportunity.
Wow. Well said. Smitty, what you got, man? What we going to take our audience home with? I know you got some pearls of wisdom over there for us.
Well, I tell you, here's a quote. It's really bad if you don't read at least one book per month. It's very bad if you don't realize how much that matters.
Yeah, it does matter. It does matter. And as we always say on the Crotchety Old Men, as we sign out, if you didn't know, now you know.
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks, John. Take care.
Thank you.